Hey there, everyone. Klaudia Tirico, editor of Demand Gen Report here, and I'm back with another episode of CXO Conversations. With me today is Jim Sharpe, CEO of Aventri. Aventri is a virtual and hybrid event management technology. So we're here today to talk all things events and specifically hybrid events because the world is, slowly going back to in person. But honestly, I believe, and from what I'm seeing in the industry, virtual and hybrid events still have a place in B2B in this new normal, even though I hate saying the new normal. But I'm so excited to get the scoop on what we can expect from the event space moving forward. So Jim is the perfect person to talk to about that. So Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Claudia. It's great to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me as well. So, to kick things off, I'd love for you to introduce our audience to yourself and your work at Aventri.
Well, thank you. Again, the CEO at Aventri, I joined the company in January of 2020. So obviously impeccable timing for entering the event space. But before I talk about Aventri, a brief background on me. I spent most of my career in the tech-enabled services side of things. I ran a large business unit for a very innovative company called GLG, which had pioneered the way that industry professionals connect with one another. And a lot of that was empowered by AI applications, which ties in a bit to what we do at Aventri, given that at the end of the day, we're helping people connect better. So back to Aventri, though. Stepped into the business in early January 2020. COVID impacted our business. But at the same time, it also spurred a massive period of innovation, both within the industry and within the walls of Aventri. So we pivoted toward a virtual event capability. So adding to our live capability, virtual and now hybrid. And we do think there's just going to be a continued evolution and escalation of innovation in our industry going forward. So we're excited about that. What Aventri does, as you said, we are a software and services provider that allows event managers, event planners, and chief marketing officers to make their lives easier by running their event start to finish on our platform. So all the different types of capabilities that those professionals need to pull off a successful event is managed through our software. We host more than 50,000 events per year on our platform and more than 5 million paid registrations. Customers are people like Informa, Dell, Airbus, Lufthansa, just enterprises all around the world that take their events seriously.
Awesome. Really good stuff. So, like I said, you're the perfect person to talk to about all things events. And, now that we're going back into the in person event territory, I'd love to hear Aventri's take on the hybrid event experience. I just feel like there are so many different ideas and definitions of what a hybrid event will look like. So, I'd love to hear what that's going to look like for you and your customers.
Absolutely. Well, it is an interesting time in the market because as things go back to live in many ways, people are asking me if our expectation is that the entire market will go back live and that virtual will go away. And actually, we do not think that is the case. We think there are tremendous advantages for having both live and virtual capabilities brought together in a hybrid format. To summarize it, hybrid capabilities allow you to reach new audiences, generate new revenue streams, new ROI. So it's a very, very exciting time in the event space in that we think the overall addressable market is much larger now because of virtual and hybrid capabilities. A recent example from Aventri that I like to tell is we hosted our global all hands meeting a few weeks ago, and we did it in a hybrid format. We have all the capabilities here, so we said, why not? Let's use them. And so we had our 300 global employees joining both live. Some of them were with me in the stage where I was broadcasting from. We had people that were on their mobile devices, and we had people that were on their laptops as well. Similarly, we had speakers that were both live and virtual. And we leveraged on-site AV, we leveraged our mixing and production capabilities. We had polling going on. And we also had mobile networking going on that allowed people that were live and virtual to network with one another across the event. And it just really demonstrated the power of our ability to bring together our global company, on a budget in this case, very, very quickly and very powerfully. So we're excited about hybrid events. we think that that what if you think about really what does it mean to be at a hybrid event? Like I just described, envision somebody flying to Las Vegas to go to an event, and on the Monday they want to attend in person because of some of the content, but on Tuesday they're busy with other things and they can only really join virtually from their hotel room or some of the content they need to download after the event is over. The hybrid experience provides that big capability to do that and manage, basically at the click of the button, the way that an attendee experiences an event. It also provides outstanding networking capabilities. If you think about an event that traditionally had 3,000 employees or 3,000 attendees, now having 3,000 live and 30,000 virtually, imagine all the networking that can go on in that much larger ecosystem. So that's why we're really excited about hybrid events. We also think there are a lot of capabilities that will be brought on that allow for content libraries and the content from these live and virtual components to live on beyond the day of the event, which is another exciting topic.
That's awesome. And I couldn't agree more. We host two in-person events every year, the B2B Marketing Exchange and Sales and Marketing Exchange. And then when we went virtual, it was like, wow, we have so many attendees now from around the world who couldn't make it obviously out to Scottsdale for the event or Boston for the event. So the opportunities for hybrid and virtual are just astounding. And I love to kind of see everybody's ideas and get some insights into what that hybrid event's going to look like. But what are the pros and cons of a hybrid experience? Virtual events were able to, like I said, bring people together from all over the world. So I imagine hybrid events, like you just said, they're will lead even more, bring in more attendees, more leads, more revenues. So can you speak a little bit about the pros and cons of the hybrid experience and what people should kind of look out for when planning them?
Yeah, definitely. I think in summary, the pros greatly outweigh the cons, but I'll talk about them. So obviously, as I mentioned, that it allows you to bring together the best of both worlds, people that can be there live and people that cannot. And it allows the event organizer to reach new audiences. We recently had a customer that, through organizing their event in a hybrid fashion, was able to have 90% more attendees and also had attendees from 76 different countries coming to this relatively small event. And I think that greatly changed the way that they can interact with their constituents going forward. So there's a lot of great case studies out there. And again, just think about the pro of being able to have 3,000 people that are paying to be there live with another 30,000 people that are dialed in virtually, and all that brings to that particular event. That introduces new revenue streams, obviously, both for those attendees and the exhibitors. But a big part of the hybrid event experience too is data, which allows you to not only track what your live event attendees are doing on site, but now the power of virtual events have really given us another rich data stream that marketers can leverage to determine the ROI of those events, and bringing those together in one way. So you have the event data merged across live and virtual formats is a very powerful thing. There's other things that people don't think about as often, but the hybrid event is also a great insurance policy, meaning that in the future, if you set up a live and virtual, you've set up an event, you want to have that ability to switch at the click of a button over to the hybrid format, meaning that if for a reason like a pandemic, God forbid, or some sort of other event, you can't have people live, the ability to switch over to that virtual format at the click of a button is something that I think it should not be overlooked. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is that we do think that one of the pros is the ability for the content of the event to live on greater than ever before. From live events, there wasn't a great job done of keeping that content in a place where it's digestible for people into the future. We do think that that's a pro. Now, in terms of cons, like we as a provider of the software and services, we're well aware of what can go wrong with a hybrid event, and if you're not careful, they can become very complex. When you're managing live and virtual attendees, presenters, production capabilities, it can be difficult to make it all work. So you have to have a very tight ecosystem of providers to be able to do that successfully. That's why we argue at Aventri that having one provider is the way to go, so that everything is sort of seamless start to finish. But that is one thing that people have to keep in mind, is that you do have to think through the complexity of that event. And if you're not careful, it could get kind of expensive as well. You also need a way to merge the data. So again, if you're using multiple providers in running a hybrid event, you're going to have live data, you're going to have virtual data. How do you bring it all together? That's one of the other potential challenges of it. But as you said early on, I think that the pros greatly outweigh the cons, and overall, we're very excited about what hybrid events mean for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds fun, right? I mean, I play a big role in planning our events. So I'm personally looking forward to seeing how we could create this hybrid experience that everyone will love. And going back to the topic of networking, you had mentioned, obviously it expands the ability to network with people from around the world. And that's a key aspect of event experiences. So tell me a little bit more about what you envision this to look like in the hybrid setting. Do you see people just in a room networking with people who are virtual? What would that look like in a real life kind of event, day in the life type of thing?
So it's one of my favorite topics, so I'm glad we're addressing it. And There are tremendous opportunities for networking across hybrid events. The reason I know that is because we have built them at the company here. So if you think about networking capabilities, overall, the first thing we hear from event planners, about 90% of them say that engagement is the biggest challenge with virtual events. How do you keep people engaged? And they think one of the number one tools for overcoming that engagement issue is creating networking opportunities. It's also probably the leading reason that people attend events live is who they may meet, who they may do business with. So you have to really recreate that for the event business to be successful in a hybrid format. So there are a number of ways that it can be done. As I described to you before, like our all hands meeting was a great example of that, but I'll just walk you through how that works. So the first thing you can do on certain platforms is you actually get AI-driven networking recommendations. So when you register for an event, it asks you a couple of questions about your interests and actually recommends people that you should meet at that event, right? So you can, add a star next to them and say, yeah, I'm going to follow up with that person later. You can instantly schedule one-to-one meetings with them, or schedule a chat with them. So that's the recommendation side of it. Then if you happen to have interest and knowledge of who you want to meet with, you can go through the attendee roster while you're at the event through the mobile app, whether you're sitting there live or attending virtually. And through systems like Aventri, you can start an instant chat with people. You can launch a video call with those individuals as well, and and network with them. And then there's another interesting area emerging in networking, which is what we call virtual booths, which is having exhibitor booths in a virtual format that allow you to enter a booth if you can't be there live, enter the booth, pick up some information, and then have a live conversation with somebody that works for the exhibitor, similar to how you would do it on a show floor. So there's a tremendous amount of networking out there. I think that from our perspective, we're excited about the AI capabilities of that, and that our system gets smarter every time we recommend an introduction, and it happens or doesn't happen. The system continues to learn how we should introduce people in the future. So we think the sky's the limit there, and I can envision, walking around a show floor in the future and having it, recommend to me that I should head 500 yards to the left to that coffee bar to meet somebody that I want to meet. So that's kind of the future of networking that we're excited about. And then I think, we're also talking about the way that events live on in the future. So the event's over, but can you create micro communities of people that met each other at that event that need a place to go and continue to consume that content and continue to meet with each other going on? So we're starting to invest in technologies around, allowing micro communities to live on after the event is over.
Awesome. Very cool. And you also, a few questions ago, you mentioned, if you don't plan accordingly, it could get expensive. And I imagine a hybrid experience could be a little pricier than, just the physical or just the virtual, because now you're combining both. So, tell me a little bit about how we could save on costs, and what really will it take to get, the C-suite to even buy into a hybrid experience.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question because the the event market is a huge part of the marketing stack. One in $5 in marketing go toward events, so you can see the importance of it. But that only happens because people are able to prove the ROI of the events. What's the return on investment that I'm getting for sending my team or sponsoring this event or throwing this event? And so it really does come down a lot to data. So to the second part of your question, like how do you convince the C-suite, is you have to be tracking the right data from the event and then show, the decision makers at your company that based on the business goals that you had for that event, you were able to reach those goals, right? So you need not just registration data, but you need rich data. And hopefully you're working with the right provider who has that data for you and can help you make the greatest sense of it. The data that you can look at, I mean, there's all sorts of things, but everything from dwell time, the amount of time people are spending in sessions, how many leads you got from the event, and then also tying that back into your marketing engine and starting to do things with that data and seeing what the results of that are. So there's the ability to justify the ROI is the key here. And to your point on how it can get expensive, if you work with an all-in-one platform, it really doesn't get that expensive because all you're really adding on is the virtual and mixing capabilities. But I do think the concern would be is if you are working with multiple providers, each of which are coming to you with a point solution, I think welding those together would actually create a decent amount of expense at the event.
Very interesting. And going to a sponsor or exhibitor side, can you talk about what event organizers kind of need to keep in mind to ensure their sponsors get the most out of their partnership of the hybrid experience?
Yes, the exhibitor is such a huge part. The sponsor and the exhibitor is such a huge part of the event ecosystem. Of course, it's like if the attendees are the lifeblood of the event, the main financial providers for those events are the exhibitors and sponsors. So at the end of the day, you have to make them very happy. And I think that we all agree that most virtual events to date have been relatively flat in terms of their way to engage sponsors, right? So a simple banner ad or a logo is not going to cut it in terms of the way that marketers want to reach their audiences. Now that is evolving and getting better. There are new ways now to innovate around sponsorships, and a few examples that come to mind. We're starting to experiment with pre-event sponsorship efforts. So before the event, sponsors can leverage the list of registrations and connect with attendees that want to meet with them and get a pre-populated set of meetings ready for the event. So get your calendar of meetings ready before the event, start to get some recognition in that way. During the event, there are a number of ways that a sponsor can get ROI. Of course, we're all familiar with the way they do it at live events, but in terms of the virtual event sponsorship, there are the banners and the logos, but what's more robust than that is allowing sponsors to have sponsor niche experiences. So whether it's a specific breakout room or a lunch and learn or even a yoga session, the ability for the sponsors to get top billing at that particular part of the event is something that is growing and seems to be working pretty well. You can have trivia sessions that are sponsored by those sponsors as well. Now, there's another thing with virtual booth, which I mentioned, is that now you can, through certain platforms, you have the ability for those sponsors and exhibitors to reach audiences real time like they would if they were on the show floor. So that virtual booth is something you definitely need to offer for your sponsors there. And then, as things continue to evolve post-event, like we talked about micro communities and content libraries, I think there's ways for sponsors there to sponsor niche areas that emerge after these particular events. So there's definitely a lot going on in terms of the sponsorship side of events. I'm completely confident that the hybrid capability is still going to help sponsors and exhibitors reach their goals.
Awesome. And I love that there's an opportunity there to really engage with audiences before and after the event as well. And that's definitely key. And it'll just kind of extend the lifeline of the event for sure. Let's talk measurement. So obviously it was easy to measure virtual events and, because you're tracking every single move, every click and every engagement. So what about hybrid events? So we're back to physical, we're doing some virtual. What are some best practices that you could share around measuring hybrid events?
Yes. Again, we just think the data layer of this industry is so critical, which is why we're investing in data intelligence the way that we are. As we all know, when you're walking a live event floor, the data that has been captured in the past comes from your digital badge or session scanning, where you leave your business card, other things like that. And then from the virtual event, you've had far more data, dwell time in session. You don't really fully understand the engagement of the people, but you know where they were, right? So bringing those together is sort of the way that the hybrid data management will work. I think that in terms of how you measure the specific event, I think that, again, it comes down to capturing the right data. So whatever the business goals are that you have for that hybrid event. Is it all about the leads I want to generate? Is it all about the impressions I want to make on somebody? Whatever the goals might be, um, you need to make sure that you're working with a partner that can capture that data for you and then quickly get it back to you and your sponsors. And so overall, we think that that is the right way to do so. You need to consolidate all your data into sort of one view that allows you to just have an overarching perspective on what happened at that particular event. And then you have to leverage it. And so take that data that you get, put it into your CRM or whatever marketing tool that you're trying to leverage after that event and see how it goes and come back and evaluate that ROI as well. So I think this is an emerging field of people trying to understand exactly how to measure it. That is part of the reason that sponsors have had some trouble justifying their ROI because that measurement hasn't all been there until now. And then additionally, you see a lot of events where the attendance or the ticket prices have been lower or zero simply because the event organizer also didn't know how to justify the ROI and how to monetize it.
Very interesting. And I mean, yeah, data is key and it'll help plan for future events. I assume part of that is also, getting feedback from attendees, doing surveys and things like that, and then tracking social media. So there are plenty of opportunities to really get great insights from audiences to make events even better in the future. But tell me about the role of AI here. I think you briefly mentioned, AI powered, networking and kind of connecting people together. So what role does AI play in planning, promoting, and just bringing people together to engage?
Yeah, so I've talked a bit about this topic publicly in the past because I think that AI is a word that's dramatically overused in every industry. I'm sure we all agree with that. So if you're looking at the high definition of AI is basically mimicking human decision making, which is a pretty high bar. The version of AI that I like to use is one where we use machines to help inform better decision making, and we've certainly cleared that bar in the events industry in that we're leveraging capabilities to make smarter decisions overall. And so I think the role that AI is playing is emerging. The way that it is helping right now within the walls of my company is that we are leveraging it for our networking capabilities. So again, the ability to mix and match interests and then recommend who people should meet at an event is an application of AI that we're excited about. But if you think about the future of that and how you can expand that capability, that's when it gets exciting. And I envision a world where you're walking around an event floor with your mobile app, and the mobile app is recommending everything from people you should meet to sessions you should attend to directions you should head in. And just think about that capability where your mobile app could tell you to go 500 yards, to the north to head to this coffee bar because there's someone you really want to meet over there. Similarly, the ability to say, no, you should leave this session now and go to this other one because it's going to be more in line with what you're interested in. So we're excited about the capabilities of artificial intelligence as it pertains to the event attendee having a great experience. But also there's other elements to AI that we're seeing, and one is facial recognition. So the Mobile World Congress Barcelona last year used facial recognition. Obviously, there's security concerns with using that, but we think that's an emerging area of AI that'll continue. And then the next layer of this, I think, is really how AI is going to be informing the data that comes out of the event, right? So we're calling it like marketing intelligence, but basically, the data that you have, how are you actually now leveraging machine learning and other things to make better sense of that data for your constituents and your sponsors? So it's a big area, but again, to my first point, like I think that many industries overuse the term, but I think the events industry is one that is benefiting, generally speaking, from artificial intelligence.
Awesome. Yeah, we had an element of that for our events as well, where it was kind of like doing matchmaking for people to network, and it was really really cool. So I love the idea of artificial intelligence. I still kind of think that human element is necessary, but that all comes down to the data. As long as you're feeding that AI the right data, it could really be powerful. All right. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to kind of add here as we kind of move towards this new hybrid event experience?
I don't think so. I mean, we covered a lot. It's been a great discussion there. One thing that I talk about quite often within the walls of my company is what I call easy to buy, easy to use. And I think that a big thing for us is making sure that solutions that we build are very easy for people to leverage. Just because we're doing complex things doesn't mean our software needs to be complex. And that's a big part of the industry as well. And I would encourage anybody who's looking at making decisions to ensure that there is a great ease of use factor in the solutions that they're choosing to get these things done.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'd love to kind of steer the conversation a little bit because we call this CXO conversations. So I always like to ask, what kind of chats and conversations are you having with other C-level executives and marketing leaders these days? What are the top questions you're hearing? How are priorities and stress levels changing? So yeah, what are you hearing in the space?
Yeah, well, it's encouraging now that we're starting to have the ability to get together live. Obviously, for the past 18 months, it's been quite a few virtual conversations. I'm actually going to be in Utah next week at my first sort of conference with other CEOs live, so I'm very excited for that. There are three topics that come to mind. I mean, the first is that there's just a lot of macro economy discussion going on. So in the events business, for example, um, the COVID headlines. When are things opening up? What do changing mask wearing rules mean for events? When are people going to get back on planes, and what's the recovery time going to be? And that doesn't just apply to the events business. It's for anybody that wants to get on site. If you're selling medical devices, you can't do it. If you can't see people in person, et cetera. So there's just a big theme about overall, what are things going to look like economically? The other interesting thing, which is very topical for all of us, on this talking virtually here on this platform, is what what does the return to work look like from an office perspective, right? So we, here are making these decisions about, um, how have we evolved in the last year and change toward being physical in the office or being able to work virtually and remotely. We are actually quite a distributed company, so completely comfortable with a highly distributed team going forward. And in fact, the people we're recruiting now want to be, I want to have the options to work remotely. So it's a very interesting time to determine not only how do we get back safely in the office and what are the rules, which is right around the corner, but how do we go forward in running the business? And as somebody who in the past used to favor, in person in the office, I think my opinion's actually been changed as a result of the past year and a half. So that's an interesting topic that we're talking about. And I'm noticing that people are starting to think long term. So, a year ago at this time, everybody in the event space was saying, okay, I'm going to look a week ahead. I'm not going to make any big decisions. If I need a virtual event next Thursday, whatever it might be. But now we're starting to see enterprises and other people make long-term decisions. And so you're seeing just much more enterprise discussions going on about what do the next 3 years look like for us together as companies, as opposed to what was previously just short-term, get through the quarter type of thinking. So it's a very interesting time. Stress levels, I think they're always at a certain level, but I feel like people are highly relieved that there's some element of normalcy that's returning, especially here in the US.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely actually right in the weeds of going back into the office now in almost a hybrid setting as well. So you could kind of mimic that hybrid event experience at the office by over at Demand Gen Report. So we have a few days in the office, few days at home, and I think everybody's just excited to see each other, but who knows how long that's going to last, right? It's always like that fresh, everybody's back in the office. It's exciting, but then it's like, all right, I'd rather work from home now. So I'm definitely curious to see how that pans out as well. So my last question for you, what is next for Aventri?
Well, accelerated growth is the hope. From our perspective, we are grateful that things are starting to return. We are extremely well positioned because of that. So if you look at where we were before the pandemic, and then adding those virtual capabilities, which was a necessity that frankly wasn't on our mind 18 months ago, having those two things together puts us in a really good position. So we have a robust product roadmap. We're moving quickly, but a lot of it is really adding on to this already broad capability that we have and more than a decade of experience in serving great enterprises. So for us, like very excited about what the capabilities or what the near-term future looks like. I think, from my perspective, I want to make sure that we can keep up with the wave when it returns. We're a big company, but at the same time, we've been very focused on the virtual side of the world for the last 18 months. So a few months ago, we started repositioning ourselves to make sure that we're ready to rock when we're doing thousands of events per day on our platform. I mean, that's going to be a really exciting time. So we're fired up, and it's a great time to be at Aventri, and hopefully for all of us, we're soon moving past this pandemic and get back to business.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, Jim, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for this great conversation and your great insights. And thank you to everyone watching, of course. That's a wrap on another episode of CXO Conversations. I will see you on the next one. And as always, hit that like or subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. And of course, drop me a line on LinkedIn or Twitter if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would be a great fit. I'd love to hear from you. And then, yeah, so Jim, thank you again. And I'm excited to hopefully see you at the next in-person/hybrid event.
Well, thank you, Claudia, and looking forward to it. Enjoyed the conversation today.